Level 1. Sensation and awareness. From the earliest moments of life, consciousness begins with simple sensation. A newborn experiences the world through sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell, each stimulus forming the first threads of awareness. In the plains of Africa, where Homo sapiens first emerged over 200,000 years ago, early humans perceived changes in light and shadow, the rustling of leaves, or the distant cry of animals. These sensory inputs were not yet abstract. They were immediate experiences that demanded reaction for survival. Awareness at this level is raw and unfiltered, a foundation for everything that follows. Life's earliest meaning emerges through attentive perception, the act of noticing without judgment, forming the very building blocks of consciousness. Reflection invites viewers to consider their own senses moment by moment as the primary doorway to experiencing reality. Level 2. Attention and focus. Attention is the mind's first tool for shaping experience. Early humans learned to direct focus, discerning edible plants from poisonous ones, friend from foe, or predator from prey. In the dense forests of Europe, during the Upper Paleolithic era, our ancestors honed attention to detail, interpreting footprints, animal tracks, and changes in weather. Life's significance at this level lies in understanding that consciousness is selective. Not all information is equal. The mind learns to prioritize, guiding action and learning. Reflection encourages viewers to observe where their own attention drifts, noticing patterns of distraction and focus, understanding that the deliberate directing of attention is a fundamental act of conscious life. Level 3. Memory formation. Memory transforms fleeting sensations into coherent experience. Early humans relied on memory to recall the location of water sources, the timing of seasons, and the habits of animals. Archaeological evidence from sites like Lascaux in France suggests that cave paintings were not merely artistic expressions, but mnemonic devices, embedding knowledge for survival and social cohesion. Life's meaning expands as consciousness integrates past experiences to navigate the present. Reflection invites viewers to consider their own memories, recognizing how recalling events shapes perception, decision-making, and identity. Memory is the silent architect of consciousness, constructing continuity in an otherwise ephemeral world. Level 4. Emotional awareness. Emotion emerges as the mind interprets events, signaling pleasure, danger, attachment, or loss. Early humans experienced joy in communal hunting successes and sorrow at the loss of loved ones. Anthropologists studying indigenous tribes in the Amazon observe how emotion guides social cohesion, decision-making, and moral behavior. Life's meaning at this level is revealed in the interplay of feeling and awareness. Emotion colors perception, influencing choices and shaping experience. Reflection encourages viewers to notice their emotional responses without judgment, understanding that conscious life is inseparable from feeling and that cultivating awareness of emotion is a step toward deeper self-knowledge. Level 5. Basic self-recognition. Self-recognition marks a profound milestone in consciousness. Around 2 years of age, humans develop the ability to recognize themselves in mirrors, an ability rare among other species. In evolutionary terms, this reflects a growing complexity in the prefrontal cortex, allowing the mind to form the concept of I separate from the environment. Life's meaning begins to shift from mere survival to identity and intentionality. Reflection invites viewers to explore the contours of their self-perception, observing the boundaries between self and other, internal and external, recognizing that self-awareness is the foundation for introspection and moral reasoning. Level 6. Curiosity and exploration. Curiosity drives humans to explore beyond immediate needs. Early Homo sapiens migrated out of Africa, navigating unfamiliar terrains and adapting to diverse climates. Curiosity led to innovation, the shaping of tools, the discovery of fire, and the cultivation of plants. Life's meaning expands through the pursuit of knowledge, experimentation, and observation. Reflection encourages viewers to notice what sparks their curiosity, observing how inquiry fuels growth, creativity, and the expansion of consciousness. Curiosity transforms mere existence into purposeful exploration, laying the groundwork for higher reasoning and abstract thought. Level 7. Social awareness and empathy. Consciousness is enriched by social connection. Early humans developed empathy, recognizing emotions in others and responding with care or caution. Tribal life depended on cooperation. Shared hunting, childcare, and storytelling strengthened communal bonds. Anthropologists studying San hunter-gatherers in southern Africa emphasize the role of storytelling in transmitting cultural memory and ethical norms. Life's meaning emerges in understanding others, appreciating shared experience, and cultivating empathy as a tool for ethical living. Reflection invites viewers to observe social interactions, noticing subtle cues, emotional exchanges, and the profound influence of others on one's own conscious experience. Level 8. Language and symbolic thought. The emergence of language represents a revolution in human consciousness. Early humans used symbols, gestures, and eventually spoken words to communicate complex ideas, negotiate social structures, and pass down knowledge. Cave art in Chauvet and Lascaux, along with ancient scripts like cuneiform in Mesopotamia, demonstrates the power of symbols to represent thought beyond the immediate moment. Life's meaning deepens as humans articulate ideas, share knowledge, and imagine possibilities. Reflection encourages viewers to notice the language they use internally and externally, observing how words shape thought, identity, and understanding of reality. Level 9. Imagination and abstract thinking. Imagination allows consciousness to transcend immediate reality. Humans envisioned possibilities, planned hunts, and created myths to explain natural phenomena. The stories of ancient Sumer, the epics of Gilgamesh, and Egyptian cosmology illustrate the human capacity to imagine worlds beyond sensory experience. Life's meaning emerges through the capacity to conceive alternatives, predict outcomes, and dream of what does not yet exist. Reflection invites viewers to cultivate imagination as a conscious practice, observing how thought experiments, creativity, and abstract reasoning expand awareness and enrich perception. Level 10. Early moral awareness. With self-recognition, social awareness, and imagination, humans began to discern right from wrong, fairness from injustice. Archaeological findings from ancient burial sites indicate that early humans cared for the sick, suggesting ethical consideration and empathy. Philosophical texts from Mesopotamia, Egypt, and India explore early moral codes, emphasizing justice, reciprocity, and responsibility. Life's meaning emerges as consciousness extends beyond self-interest to consideration of others, ethics, and societal harmony. Reflection encourages viewers to observe moral intuitions, the impact of choices, and the subtle interplay of intention and action, laying the foundation for higher reasoning and the profound exploration of consciousness in later levels. Level 11. Emotional complexity and nuance. As humans developed memory and imagination, emotions became layered and nuanced. Early humans on the African savannas experienced complex emotional landscapes: joy at a successful hunt, grief at the loss of a companion, anxiety anticipating natural disasters. Anthropologists studying the Hadza tribe in Tanzania observed that emotions guide social cohesion, ethical judgment, and survival. Life's meaning deepens as consciousness integrates sensation, thought, and feeling into coherent experience. Reflection encourages viewers to notice subtle emotional shifts, the interplay between intuition and reasoning, and the ways emotions inform decision-making, enriching awareness of self and others. Level 12. Self-reflection and inner dialogue. Self-awareness matured into the capacity for reflection. Ancient philosophers, such as Confucius in China and Socrates in Greece, emphasized knowing oneself as the foundation of wisdom. In small villages along the Nile, over 4,000 years ago, scribes recorded daily life, reflecting not only external events but personal insight. Life's significance emerges as consciousness turns inward, examining thought patterns, desires, and moral inclinations. Reflection invites viewers to listen to their inner dialogue, observe recurring mental narratives, and develop clarity about personal motivations, cultivating insight as a tool for growth and ethical action. Level 13. Anticipation and planning. The mind's ability to foresee consequences enabled humans to plan beyond immediate survival. Early farmers in the Fertile Crescent planted crops according to seasonal cycles, anticipating droughts and floods. Hunters in Ice Age Europe tracked animal migration patterns, coordinating communal hunts for optimal success. Life's meaning expands as consciousness incorporates foresight, balancing desire with prudence. Reflection encourages viewers to notice how they anticipate outcomes in daily life, understanding how conscious planning shapes behavior, responsibility, and the pursuit of long-term goals. Level 14. Social cognition and theory of mind. Humans began to comprehend that others possess thoughts, intentions, and desires distinct from their own, a concept known as theory of mind. In Paleolithic Europe, communal living demanded predicting allies' actions, mediating conflict, and collaborating effectively. Observing facial expressions, gestures, and social cues became a survival skill. Life's significance emerges in understanding empathy, trust, and cooperation as central to human consciousness. Reflection invites viewers to consider how perceiving others' minds influences interaction, decision-making, and ethical understanding, cultivating relational awareness. Level 15. Symbolic understanding and ritual. Symbolic thought allowed humans to encode meaning beyond the immediate and tangible. Ancient civilizations, from Mesopotamia to the Indus Valley, developed rituals, religious practices, and symbolic art. The ziggurats of Ur and Mohenjo-Daro's urban planning reflect not only technical mastery but deep conceptual understanding of community, spirituality, and cosmic order. Life's meaning arises through observation of patterns, abstraction, and participation in shared symbolic systems. Reflection encourages viewers to notice symbols in daily life, rituals, and culture, understanding how they convey values, structure experience, and shape consciousness. Level 16. Language as a tool for conscious expansion. Language transformed thought and society. Spoken word, writing systems, and poetry allowed humans to record experience, transmit knowledge, and speculate on possibilities. In ancient Sumer, cuneiform inscriptions preserved administrative, religious, and literary knowledge, connecting individuals across generations. Life's significance emerges as language enables complex reasoning, abstractions, and social cohesion. Reflection invites viewers to consider their use of language internally and externally, observing how words shape perception, narrative, and understanding of self and world. Level 17. Memory, imagination, and mental time travel. Consciousness evolved to imagine scenarios beyond immediate reality. Humans envisioned futures, remembered pasts, and contemplated alternate outcomes. In Paleolithic France, cave paintings depicting hunts and animals reflect both memory and imagination, combining survival information with creative storytelling. Life's meaning emerges as the mind navigates temporal landscapes, integrating past experience and future possibilities to guide ethical choices and innovative solutions. Reflection encourages viewers to notice how memory and imagination intersect, shaping identity, anticipation, and adaptive decision-making. Level 18. Moral reasoning and ethical reflection. Consciousness developed ethical dimensions. Ancient Egyptian texts, like the Instructions of Ptah-hotep, emphasized justice, reciprocity, and moral conduct, guiding personal and societal behavior. Observations of early communities show care for the vulnerable, such as injured hunters or the elderly, reflecting nascent moral awareness. Life's significance expands as humans recognize that awareness entails responsibility, linking understanding with ethical action. Reflection encourages viewers to examine moral intuitions, the consequences of choices, and the balance between self-interest and the common good. Level 19. Creative problem solving. Curiosity and imagination converge in problem solving. Early humans devised tools, constructed shelters, and coordinated strategies for hunting and defense. Archaeological evidence from sites like Blombos Cave in South Africa shows engraved ochre patterns, implying symbolic cognition and abstract thought applied to practical challenges. Life's meaning emerges in applying observation, creativity, and reflection to overcome obstacles, innovate, and enhance survival. Reflection invites viewers to consider how they approach challenges, integrating intuition, logic, and creativity as expressions of conscious engagement with reality. Level 20. Awareness of self in society. At this level, consciousness recognizes its place within social systems. Humans observed hierarchies, norms, and collective goals, contributing to cultural continuity. In early cities of Mesopotamia, administrative records, legal codes, and communal projects illustrate awareness of individual roles in society. Life's significance arises as consciousness integrates personal experience with social context, balancing individuality with collaboration. Reflection encourages viewers to consider their impact within communities, observing interactions, influence, and responsibilities. Understanding that self-awareness in a social framework is central to the evolution of human consciousness. Level 21. Advanced Emotional Intelligence. As human societies grew, so did the complexity of emotional awareness. In the Bronze Age city-states of Mesopotamia, individuals navigated intricate social hierarchies, requiring nuanced understanding of jealousy, loyalty, pride, and empathy. Leaders like Hammurabi not only legislated laws, but understood human psychology, ensuring cohesion and stability. Life's meaning expands as consciousness integrates recognition of one's own feelings with perception of others, fostering cooperation, conflict resolution, and ethical living. Reflection encourages viewers to observe subtle emotional cues in daily life, noticing how empathy shapes relationships, decisions, and collective well-being. Level 22. Memory, culture, and storytelling. Memory extends beyond the individual into collective consciousness through culture. Ancient Egyptians preserved stories in hieroglyphics, passing down moral lessons, historical events, and religious insights. Oral traditions in Africa, Australia, and the Americas conveyed wisdom through generations, blending factual knowledge with imaginative narrative. Life's significance emerges as humans recognize the power of shared memory to shape identity, values, and social norms. Reflection invites viewers to consider how personal memories connect with cultural narratives, observing patterns that guide thought, behavior, and meaning-making. Level 23. Curiosity and exploration. Human curiosity drives expansion of experience and knowledge. Polynesian navigators traversed the Pacific Ocean using stars, wind, and wave patterns, discovering islands thousands of miles from their origins. In parallel, European explorers like Marco Polo and Ibn Battuta journeyed across continents, documenting cultures, geographies, and human practices. Life's meaning deepens as curiosity transforms survival into purposeful exploration. Reflection encourages viewers to examine their own impulses to learn, travel, and experiment, understanding curiosity as a fundamental driver of conscious evolution. Level 24. Abstract thought and conceptualization. Abstract thought allows humans to form concepts beyond direct experience. Ancient Greek philosophers, including Plato and Aristotle, debated the nature of reality, morality, and knowledge. Mathematical abstraction, evident in Babylonian and Egyptian geometry, enabled architectural and agricultural innovation. Life's significance emerges as consciousness moves from concrete perception to conceptual reasoning, imagining possibilities, relationships, and patterns. Reflection invites viewers to consider how abstraction shapes understanding, problem-solving, and creative expression, cultivating a mind capable of transcending immediate sensory input. Level 25. Self-observation and metacognition. Humans developed the ability to think about thinking. In monasteries across India, Tibet, and China, meditative practices encouraged awareness of thought processes, emotional reactions, and moral inclinations. The Stoics of Rome, including Marcus Aurelius, documented exercises in self-reflection, noting habitual patterns and cultivating rational control over impulses. Life's meaning expands as consciousness becomes self-directed, observing its own structure, biases, and tendencies. Reflection encourages viewers to notice thought patterns, emotional triggers, and habitual judgments, deepening insight and fostering mental clarity. Level 26. Creativity as a cognitive tool. Creativity extends awareness into problem-solving, expression, and exploration. Renaissance artists like Leonardo da Vinci blended anatomy, engineering, and art, reflecting multifaceted curiosity. Indigenous art from the Americas, Africa, and Oceania demonstrates integration of symbolic thought, spiritual insight, and environmental observation. Life's significance emerges as conscious creativity transforms perception into innovation, linking imagination with practical application. Reflection invites viewers to cultivate personal creativity, observing how ideas emerge, evolve, and intersect with purpose, enriching both inner and outer worlds. Level 27. Moral philosophy and ethical reasoning. Consciousness begins to codify ethical understanding. Confucius in ancient China emphasized harmony, virtue, and duty. Aristotle defined virtue as a balance between excess and deficiency. These frameworks guided societies, teaching observation of actions, consequences, and intention. Life's meaning deepens as humans integrate reflection, empathy, and societal norms into decision-making. Reflection encourages viewers to examine ethical principles in daily life, noticing how moral reasoning interacts with emotion, context, and long-term vision, fostering integrity and thoughtful action. Level 28. Social structures and collective consciousness. Humans recognize themselves as part of larger networks. Ancient cities like Uruk, Mohenjo-Daro, and Thebes illustrate organized social structures, division of labor, and collective responsibility. Observing these systems, humans develop awareness of interdependence, justice, and governance. Life's significance emerges from participation in collective frameworks, where conscious action contributes to societal coherence. Reflection invites viewers to notice their own role in social networks, understanding how observation, empathy, and contribution maintain communal stability and shared growth. Level 29. Integration of knowledge and experience. Humans synthesize sensory input, memory, imagination, and moral insight into coherent understanding. In the courts of Renaissance Florence, scholars, artists, and scientists exchanged ideas, merging art, mathematics, and philosophy to generate transformative knowledge. Life's meaning expands as consciousness integrates diverse inputs, creating patterns, predictions, and insights that guide action. Reflection encourages viewers to observe how experiences connect, noticing recurring themes, lessons, and opportunities for growth, fostering holistic perception of self and environment. Level 30. Awareness of temporal flow and mortality. Consciousness recognizes impermanence and temporality. Ancient Egyptians documented life cycles and funerary practices to honor mortality, while Stoics in Rome reflected on death as a guide for ethical living. Humans perceive past, present, and potential futures, shaping choices and cultivating meaning. Life's significance emerges in embracing transience, valuing moments, and aligning actions with awareness of mortality. Reflection invites viewers to contemplate the flow of time, observing how past experiences inform present decisions and how consciousness anticipates future possibilities, fostering wisdom, presence, and purposeful living. Level 31. The Philosopher's Lens. For centuries, thinkers have asked, what is key consciousness? Socrates invited self-examination, Buddha observed the mind's patterns, and Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. You can apply their questions to your own mind right now, noticing how thoughts arise, how assumptions shape perception, and how awareness can step back to observe itself. Level 32. The Architecture of Thought. Thoughts build invisible structures inside the mind. Some drift like leaves, others form solid bridges of beliefs and convictions. By observing them, you can see which patterns shape your choices, which repeat endlessly, and which are fragile, allowing the mind to notice its own frameworks without attachment. Level 33. The Psychology of Awareness. Consciousness is layered: conscious, subconscious, and metacognitive. Many actions and emotions arise without notice, yet awareness can observe these hidden currents, gently understanding the impulses, biases, and patterns that often guide behavior without the mind even realizing it. Level 34. The Dance of Attention. Attention is a spotlight, choosing what to illuminate in the theater of the mind. By noticing where your focus naturally drifts and gently shifting it, you become aware of how easily the mind is pulled by habit and how freely awareness can direct attention toward clarity, calm, and insight. Level 35. The Paradox of Knowledge. The more you learn, the more gaps you notice, and the more questions arise. By observing this process, you begin to see that humility is the gateway to understanding, and that insight often comes not from certainty, but from awareness of the limits of what you know. Level 36. The mirror of reflection. Through self-reflection, the mind examines choices, reactions, and patterns. By noticing reactions without judgment, awareness becomes a scientist of its own experience, seeing behavior clearly while remaining detached from the outcome, cultivating clarity and quiet understanding. Level 37. The labyrinth of memory. Memories are like winding pathways. Some lead to clarity, others to confusion. By observing memories without attachment, awareness notices recurring patterns and subtle influences. Understanding that memory is a tool to map the mind, rather than a definition of the self. Level 38. The observer in the storm. Life brings unexpected waves of thought and emotion, anxiety, excitement, regret. By remaining the observer, noticing these fluctuations without being swept away, consciousness experiences calmness, understanding that observing the storm is different from being caught within it. Level 39. The interconnected mind. Your mind is shaped not only by your own experiences, but by others, culture, and the flow of ideas over time. Observing how thoughts, beliefs, and values are influenced by external factors allows awareness to perceive connections without losing the capacity for independent reflection. Level 40. The threshold of insight 2. Consciousness is a living system of interacting thoughts, emotions, memories, and desires. By observing this system without interference, awareness experiences the simultaneous role of participant and witness, noticing patterns and flow without judgment or control. Level 41. The wisdom of ancient minds. Across centuries, humans have sought to understand consciousness. The Buddha spoke of observing the mind without attachment. Lao Tzu described the uncarved mind, and the Stoics taught detachment from fleeting emotions. By listening to these teachings, you begin to see your own thoughts as streams in a river, impermanent yet observed, allowing awareness to float above them and notice the patterns without grasping. Level 42. The science of awareness. Modern neuroscience shows that the brain is a network of dynamic activity, constantly generating thoughts, emotions, and self-perceptions. Awareness can step back and notice these processes, like observing the electrical dance of neurons without becoming them. By understanding the mechanics of the mind, observation deepens into curiosity rather than judgment, and reflection becomes precise and compassionate. Level 43. The flow of consciousness. Consciousness is rarely static. Thoughts arise, feelings appear, and attention shifts from one point to another. Observing this flow, you can notice how the mind constantly moves between past, present, and imagined futures, and yet awareness itself remains a calm witness, unshaken by the river of experience that carries most of human attention. Level 44. The mirror of impermanence. Everything within the mind is transient: thoughts, emotions, memories, and desires. Observing impermanence, you notice how resistance to change often causes suffering. Awareness, however, sees the temporary nature of all experiences, allowing space for calmness and acceptance, cultivating a clarity that is both freeing and deeply stabilizing. Level 45. Patterns in the mind. The mind loves repetition. Habits, automatic responses, recurring worries, all form invisible circuits. By observing these patterns, consciousness begins to identify loops and cycles, noticing where attachment arises and where freedom can be found. Patterns become a map, and awareness becomes the explorer, moving carefully without being trapped. Level 46. The inner observer of thought. Every thought carries energy. Some energize, some drain, some distract. By observing each thought as it arises, awareness distinguishes between the mind's chatter and the quiet presence beyond it. You realize that thinking does not define you. It is an instrument for exploration, reflection, and insight. Level 47. The science of emotion. Emotions arise from complex chemical and neural processes, yet awareness can notice them without becoming overwhelmed. By observing fear, desire, joy, or sadness as phenomena rather than fixed truths, consciousness cultivates equanimity, seeing that emotions are messages, not mandates, and can be explored without attachment. Level 48. The observer and the subconscious. Beneath conscious thought lies the subconscious, impulses, biases, forgotten memories, and instincts. Awareness can quietly watch this deeper layer, noticing patterns and influences without reacting. By observing what usually operates unnoticed, consciousness gains clarity, learning how habits form and how the mind subtly shapes perception and choice. Level 49. The nature of self. The self is often assumed to be fixed, yet observation reveals it as fluid, constructed moment by moment from perception, memory, and thought. By noticing how identity is built and maintained, awareness can see the freedom in choosing which patterns to continue and which to release. Understanding that the I is both real and a construct, a paradox that invites deep reflection. Level 50. Expanding awareness beyond the individual. Consciousness is not limited to the personal mind. It connects with the world, with others, and with ideas that transcend time. By observing the self in relation to the universe, awareness expands, noticing how every thought, action, and feeling is influenced by and influences the larger network of life. At this stage, reflection deepens. You are both observer and participant in the vast web of existence. Level 51. The meditative pause. Meditation begins with simply noticing the present moment. Awareness rests on the breath, the heartbeat, or the subtle sensations of the body. While thoughts continue to arise and fade, observing without judgment, consciousness experiences a pause between stimulus and response, revealing the mind's natural rhythm and creating a quiet space where reflection can deepen. Level 52. Awareness of thought as phenomena. Thoughts are not fixed. They appear like clouds passing across the sky of consciousness. Some are dense, some light, some fleeting. By observing each thought as a phenomenon rather than identifying with it, awareness uncovers the subtle difference between experiencing and being consumed by thought, allowing clarity and calm to emerge. Level 53. The brain's hidden symphony. Neuroscience shows that billions of neurons fire simultaneously, producing patterns that correspond to thoughts, feelings, and consciousness itself. By observing the mind at this level, awareness perceives the symphony of the brain not as a random noise, but as a coherent dance, where each thought or emotion is a note in a larger, self-organizing pattern. Level 54. The observer in the gap. Between one thought and the next exists a subtle gap, a moment of silence. Awareness can rest here, noticing the empty space without rushing to fill it with activity. These gaps, often unnoticed, are windows into the deeper self, where clarity, calm, and insight emerge naturally without effort. Level 55. The flow of attention in meditation. Attention, when trained through meditation, becomes flexible and precise. Awareness can shift effortlessly from the breath to a bodily sensation, to a sound, to a thought, noticing each with equanimity. This skill reveals how much of daily life is unconsciously directed and how gently shifting focus can lead to profound self-understanding. Level 56. Observing emotional currents. Even in stillness, emotional currents continue to flow beneath the surface. Awareness can watch subtle fluctuations of tension, longing, desire, or contentment, recognizing them as signals rather than commands. By observing rather than reacting, consciousness cultivates resilience and learns to navigate the landscape of feelings with intelligence and compassion. Level 57. The mind-body connection. Consciousness is not separate from the body. It is intimately linked to sensations, posture, and physiology. Observing subtle tensions or ease in muscles, the flow of energy, and the rhythm of the heartbeat, awareness discovers that the body is both instrument and mirror for the mind, reflecting states of attention, emotion, and thought in tangible ways. Level 58. The subtle layers of awareness. Beyond obvious thoughts and emotions lies a subtler layer of awareness, a sense of knowing that does not arise from reasoning or memory. Observing this layer, consciousness notices insights, intuitions, and subtle patterns, experiencing a depth of self that is quiet, clear, and profoundly receptive. A space where the mind feels both expanded and contained. Level 59. Synchronizing mind and breath. Breath can be a tool for harmonizing consciousness. Observing inhalation and exhalation, noticing the slight pauses in between, awareness discovers a rhythm that aligns mind and body. In this synchronization, subtle tensions dissolve, mental chatter softens, and consciousness experiences a sense of effortless flow, as if the mind is riding the current of its own natural rhythm. Level 60. Expanding the observer. Awareness now begins to expand beyond individual thoughts, emotions, and sensations, observing patterns of mental activity across minutes, hours, and even days. Consciousness notices recurring habits, cycles of thought, and patterns of attention, developing a meta-perspective where the observer sees not only what arises, but also the larger trends and tendencies of the mind, cultivating foresight, insight, and profound calm. Level 61. Consciousness as a field. At this stage, awareness begins to perceive itself not as an isolated entity, but as a field, interconnected with sensations, thoughts, and the surrounding environment. Neuroscience shows that brain activity is highly networked, producing emergent properties that cannot be reduced to individual neurons. Observing this, consciousness recognizes that the mind is both localized and expansive, a dynamic interplay of focus, perception, and underlying patterns that extend beyond the self. Level 62. The philosophy of presence. Ancient philosophy teaches that presence is the foundation of understanding. Zen masters remind us that reality is experienced only in the moment, and the past and future are constructs of the mind. By observing each breath, thought, and sensation as it arises, awareness experiences time differently. The present becomes infinitely rich, and the mind learns to step aside from habitual projection and rumination. Level 63. The mind as mirror. The mind reflects not only the external world, but its own inner states. Neuroscience demonstrates that perception is a reconstruction, influenced by memory, emotion, and expectation. Awareness begins to notice this reconstruction as a mirror, sometimes clear, sometimes distorted, allowing the observer to distinguish between what is perceived, what is imagined, and what is true within the self. Level 64. Observing the flow of thought and emotion. Thoughts and emotions arise in sequences, sometimes predictable, sometimes chaotic. By noticing the patterns without judgment, awareness begins to understand causality within the mind. For instance, a memory triggers a feeling, which shapes a thought, which influences perception. Observing this flow, consciousness develops the capacity to anticipate, respond with clarity, and disengage from automatic reactivity. Level 65. The neurochemistry of calm. Modern science shows that states of calm and focus are linked to neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, and GABA, as well as to synchronized brainwave patterns. By observing the mind and body during moments of relaxation or meditation, awareness can notice subtle shifts in physiology, learning how attention, breath, and thought patterns influence neural states, creating a feedback loop that enhances clarity, stability, and emotional balance. Level 66. Beyond the ego. Philosophy and neuroscience converge in revealing that the ego, the constructed self, is a set of habits, thoughts, and identifications. Awareness can notice the voice of the ego without being entangled in it, recognizing it as a tool rather than the core self. Observing the ego in action, consciousness begins to experience freedom, realizing that identity is flexible and that true insight emerges when the observer steps aside from habitual self-definition. Level 67. The observer of subtle patterns. As awareness deepens, attention turns to patterns beneath conscious thought, micro-emotions, fleeting impulses, and habitual reactions. Neuroscience highlights that much of decision-making occurs outside of conscious awareness. By observing these subtle patterns, consciousness becomes more nuanced, noticing tendencies before they dominate behavior and cultivating a capacity to act with intention rather than reaction. Level 68. The intersection of mind and universe. Consciousness is not isolated. It interacts with its environment continuously. Ancient philosophies suggest that the self is part of a larger whole, while modern physics and neuroscience suggest interconnectedness at multiple scales. Observing how thoughts, emotions, and actions resonate within oneself and with others, awareness begins to experience a sense of continuity, understanding the mind as part of a larger dynamic system. Level 69. Observing the mind as energy. Every thought and emotion carries energy, subtle vibrations that influence perception, inertia, and physiology. Neuroscience confirms that neural activity creates electrical and chemical patterns, and awareness can observe these subtle dynamics. By noticing the energy behind thought and feeling, consciousness develops a sensitivity to its own internal landscape, perceiving fluctuations with clarity and responding with balance rather than impulse. Level 70. The threshold of higher consciousness. At this level, awareness is able to observe multiple layers of mind simultaneously: surface thoughts, underlying emotions, subconscious patterns, and subtle physiological cues. Philosophers call this meta-awareness. Neuroscience identifies it with prefrontal cortex activity and synchronized neural networks. Observing without interference, consciousness experiences a deep integration of self, a stable witness that can notice complexity without being overwhelmed, preparing the mind for even higher levels of reflection, insight, and expanded awareness. Level 71. Expanding beyond thought. At this level, awareness begins to perceive reality beyond the chatter of thoughts. The constant commentary, judgment, and inner narrative fade into the background, leaving a pure field of consciousness. Observing this state, the mind experiences spaciousness, where perception is not limited by labels or expectations. Each sensation, each sound, each subtle breeze is experienced directly, as if the mind has become an open window into existence itself. Level 72. The silence between worlds. Silence is not simply the absence of sound, it is the subtle backdrop against which all perception occurs. By focusing on this silence, awareness discovers a depth of stillness that exists even amidst activity. In this quiet space, the boundaries between inner and outer worlds blur, and consciousness senses the interconnectedness of all phenomena, perceiving patterns and relationships that were invisible when attention was limited to the surface of thought. Level 73. Observing subtle energetic flows. Energy moves through the body and mind in ways often unnoticed. Neural impulses, hormonal shifts, and subtle emotional currents create a dynamic landscape within. By observing these flows, awareness begins to notice the rhythms of attention, the pulsing of emotion, and the interplay of thought and feeling. This sensitivity allows consciousness to navigate internal experiences with precision, noticing tension before it escalates and calm before it dissipates. Level 74. The observer and infinity. Consciousness, when fully attentive, can sense itself extending beyond the limits of immediate perception. Thoughts, memories, and emotions exist within a vast context of experience, and awareness can perceive the continuity of self across time. The mind begins to feel infinite, not in a literal sense, but as an experiential horizon where observation stretches without end, revealing the vast potential and depth of human consciousness. Level 75. The edge of self and other. At this stage, the distinction between self and other becomes less rigid. Awareness observes how thoughts, feelings, and intentions are shaped by interactions with others, while simultaneously noticing the autonomous flow of personal perception. This recognition creates a balance. The observer experiences empathy and connection without losing the clarity of self, seeing relationships as dynamic exchanges rather than fixed roles or identities. Level 76. The flow of time within. Time in consciousness is not uniform. It expands and contracts depending on focus and awareness. Observing this internal flow, one notices how attention stretches moments of reflection and compresses habitual routines. By perceiving time as fluid, awareness gains freedom from the constraints of linear perception, experiencing life as a series of interconnected, overlapping moments rather than a rigid sequence of events. Level 77. The dance of perception. Perception is active, not passive. The mind selects, interprets, and reconstructs sensory information, producing a world shaped by both internal and external forces. Observing this dance, consciousness notices how attention highlights some details while ignoring others, and how interpretation colors experience. Awareness sees that reality is both what is observed and how it is observed, creating a profound understanding of subjectivity and engagement with the world. Level 78. Observing transcendent emotions. Beyond ordinary feelings, there exist subtle, expansive emotions: awe, reverence, profound connection, and deep compassion. Awareness can notice these states without clinging, allowing them to arise and pass naturally. Experiencing these emotions expands the capacity for empathy, understanding, and insight, as consciousness perceives the depth and subtlety of human experience beyond immediate self-interest or survival instincts. Level 79. The subtle intelligence of awareness. Awareness itself possesses a kind of intelligence, noticing patterns, anticipating consequences, and integrating information across layers of mind. By observing this subtle intelligence, consciousness learns to trust the process of observation, recognizing that insight often emerges spontaneously when the mind is quiet, attentive, and receptive. This intelligence is neither ego nor external. It is intrinsic, a guiding thread within the fabric of experience. Level 80. Integration of mind and being. At this level, consciousness observes the seamless integration of thought, emotion, sensation, and awareness. The boundaries between observer and observed soften, creating a sense of unity within the mind. Patterns, impulses, and reflections are noted without attachment, yet the observer remains present, capable of action, reflection, and insight. This integration forms a stable foundation for higher exploration, where consciousness can engage with deeper philosophical, existential and meditative states. Level 81. Expanding beyond the personal mind. At this stage, awareness begins to sense itself as extending beyond the confines of the personal mind. Thoughts, emotions, and sensations are observed as transient phenomena within a larger field of consciousness. By noticing this field, the mind experiences spaciousness and freedom, understanding that identity is a dynamic process, not a fixed entity, and that observation itself can be the anchor for a deeper engagement with reality. Level 82. Observing the continuity of experience. Every moment of awareness emerges from countless prior moments, both conscious and unconscious. Observing this continuity, consciousness sees that perception is woven from memory, anticipation, and sensation, creating an intricate tapestry of experience. Awareness recognizes the interdependence of past, present, and potential future, noticing patterns without attachment and cultivating a sense of timeless presence. Level 83. The observer of subtle awareness. Beyond ordinary thought and emotion exists a layer of subtle awareness, a quiet knowing that does not rely on language or memory. By attending to this layer, consciousness becomes sensitive to the nuance of perception, noticing subtle shifts in attention, feeling, and energy. This heightened awareness allows the mind to navigate complex internal states with clarity, maintaining calm even as deeper insights arise. Level 84. The perception of reality as fluid. Reality is not fixed. Perception is an active, interpretive process. By observing how the mind constructs experience from sensory input, memory, and expectation, awareness begins to perceive reality as fluid and malleable. This understanding fosters flexibility of thought, reducing attachment to rigid beliefs, and opens the mind to the subtler aspects of existence that are often overlooked. Level 85. The subtle field of emotion and thought. Emotions and thoughts are not isolated. They ripple through consciousness, influencing perception, attention, and even physiological state. Observing these ripples, awareness notices how subtle variations in feeling and cognition shape experience. By recognizing these interactions, the mind becomes more skillful, responding with intention rather than reaction, and cultivating a sense of balance across the landscape of internal experience. Level 86. Self-transcendence through observation. As awareness deepens, the boundaries of self begin to soften. The observer notices that identification with thought, emotion, and sensation is optional. By maintaining attentive observation without attachment, consciousness experiences moments of self-transcendence, where the sense of I expands into a broader awareness that perceives both internal and external patterns simultaneously, dissolving habitual separateness. Level 87. Observing the interplay of mind and world. Consciousness is shaped by interaction with the external world, yet it also shapes perception and behavior. Awareness observes this interplay, how environment, culture, and relationships influence thought and emotion, and how the mind, in turn, projects patterns onto the world. Recognizing this dynamic allows consciousness to act with discernment, balancing engagement and detachment, and noticing the subtle co-creation of experience. Level 88. Experiencing non-linear time in awareness. Time in higher states of consciousness is perceived as non-linear. Moments of insight, reflection, and intuition occur spontaneously, not bound by sequential progression. Awareness begins to perceive layers of experience simultaneously, recognizing patterns and relationships across temporal scales. This perception allows for profound insight, revealing connections that remain invisible in ordinary linear attention. Level 89. The subtle intelligence of awareness expanded. Awareness is not merely passive, it possesses intelligence, capable of perceiving, integrating, and anticipating across multiple layers of mind. Observing this subtle intelligence, consciousness notices emergent understanding that arises without deliberate effort, revealing insights that surpass linear reasoning. This intelligence operates both within and beyond the personal self, providing a sense of guidance, coherence, and flow across mental and emotional landscapes. Level 90. Integrating higher awareness. At this stage, the mind observes thoughts, emotions, subtle awareness, and energy patterns simultaneously, integrating them into a cohesive sense of being. The distinction between observer and observed softens further, creating a unified field of awareness where reflection, intuition, and perception coexist. Consciousness is expansive, stable, and deeply present, capable of engaging with complex inner and outer realities without losing clarity or equanimity. Level 91. The infinite observer. At this stage, awareness experiences itself as limitless. Thoughts, emotions, memories, and sensations continue to arise, but the observer feels no boundary. Observation itself becomes expansive, perceiving the mind and body as instruments within a larger field of consciousness. Every experience is noted without attachment or resistance, and the sense of I softens, revealing a spacious awareness that stretches beyond ordinary perception. Level 92. Integration of inner and outer worlds. Consciousness perceives the seamless connection between internal and external realities. Sensations, emotions, and thoughts arise in relation to the environment, yet the environment itself appears as a reflection of inner patterns. Observing this interplay, awareness notes how the mind shapes perception, while simultaneously being shaped by external forces, cultivating an understanding of co-creation and interconnectedness in every experience. Level 93. Observing the universal mind. At this level, awareness begins to sense patterns of intelligence that extend beyond the personal self. Philosophical traditions and modern science alike suggest that consciousness is not entirely confined to individual brains. Observing these universal patterns, the mind notices recurring structures in thought, emotion, and behavior across beings and contexts, experiencing a subtle resonance with a greater intelligence that guides and connects existence. Level 94. The timeless observer. Time loses its linear dominance in higher awareness. Awareness perceives moments as overlapping, intertwined, and eternal. Past, present, and future are experienced simultaneously as layers within consciousness. Observing this timelessness, the mind develops an understanding of causality and experience that transcends ordinary perception, fostering profound insight, patience, and clarity in all actions and reflections. Level 95. Observing the flow of universal energy. Consciousness perceives the subtle currents of energy that underlie thought, emotion, and perception. This energy flows continuously, linking internal states with external phenomena. Awareness can notice its direction, intensity, and quality, learning to move with rather than against it. The observer experiences a sense of effortless alignment with life, sensing harmony, rhythm, and coherence in the interplay between mind, body, and universe. Level 96. The dissolution of boundaries. At this stage, the distinction between self and other becomes permeable. Observing this dissolution, awareness experiences connection without confusion, empathy without loss of clarity, and unity without merging into identification. The mind sees that separateness is a construct, yet functional when necessary, and that true understanding arises from perceiving both the oneness and the diversity of experience simultaneously. Level 97. Observation without effort. Higher awareness allows observation to occur naturally, without deliberate effort or intention. Thoughts, feelings, and sensations continue to arise, yet the mind watches without grasping or aversion. This effortless observation is self-sustaining, allowing consciousness to deepen its understanding of self, others, and the flow of existence while maintaining profound calm, clarity, and equanimity. Level 98. Experiencing universal awareness. Consciousness now perceives itself as part of a greater field of existence. The observer senses the unity of all experiences, noticing how every phenomenon, from the smallest thought to the largest cosmic event, participates in a dynamic, interconnected whole. Awareness is expansive yet precise, integrating insight, reflection, and perception across all levels of reality, cultivating profound understanding and inner peace. Level 99. The observer as creator. At this stage, awareness recognizes its role in shaping experience. Thoughts, perceptions, and emotions influence not only personal reality, but the subtle field of consciousness in which the self exists. Observation itself becomes creative, guiding attention and energy to cultivate clarity, harmony, and insight. Consciousness experiences both freedom and responsibility, understanding that the act of observing is simultaneously an act of co-creation. Level 100. Full integration of consciousness. At the ultimate level, the mind, body, emotion, and subtle awareness merge into a cohesive, expansive field of consciousness. Observation, reflection, and experience coexist seamlessly. Awareness perceives patterns across all layers of reality, feeling connected to the internal and external, the finite and the infinite. The distinction between self and universe becomes a subtle dance rather than a rigid separation. At this stage, consciousness is fully integrated, capable of profound insight, deep empathy, and serene understanding of the totality of existence.